Are you ready to learn the shocking truth about how Native Americans survived in conditions of absolute, terrifying darkness? Hello everyone. Today we're going to dive into one of history's most amazing mysteries, something you definitely weren't taught in school. Just imagine, for the Native Americans of the Great Plains, a horse was far more than just a means of transportation. Losing a trusty steed meant only one thing: certain death on the merciless prairie. But how do you find an animal when it's pitch black all around? The hunters of the Lakota tribe developed truly phenomenal, almost superhuman skills for finding missing horses in the dead of night. They literally transformed their basic senses into the most precise biological navigation tools, where the connection between human and animal became a true art of survival. In this video, we'll break down these secret techniques in minute detail. You have no idea what human perception is truly capable of. Be sure to watch this video all the way to the end, because in the finale, I'll reveal the main secret: how traces invisible to the eye, barely detectable scents, and even the slightest changes in the night breeze help them unerringly find a horse in the darkness. I promise, this information will turn your understanding of our body's capabilities upside down. What if I told you that everything you believed about the human sense of smell is wrong? The Lakota viewed darkness not as an obstacle, but as a faithful ally. Vision became completely useless at night, so hunters relied entirely on their sense of smell. The faintest sense in the cool night air carried much better and farther. This method allowed them to find lost property without a single ray of light. A distinctive scent emanated from wool, warmed by the day's heat, and worn leather. The hunter walked slowly across the prairie, carefully analyzing every breath he took. The wind carried not only the scent of dust, but also particles of sweat. The stronger this invisible trail became, the closer the desired target was. A keen sense of smell allowed him to pick up this trail from a distance of hundreds of meters. It was crucial to distinguish the desired scent from the natural odors of the nighttime steppe. The scent of wormwood or dry grass could easily mask a very faint trail. Therefore, the hunters constantly moved in zigzags, crossing invisible air currents. This helped them precisely determine the width of the scent trail in the night air. Stepping outside its boundaries meant immediately losing the correct direction. After sunset, the ground began to actively release its accumulated heat. Rising air currents carried scents from the ground up to human height. The hunter would often drop to his knees to analyze the air closer to the ground more carefully. It was right at the surface, among the stalks of tall grass, that the scent was most concentrated. There, the freshest traces of the missing horse's recent presence lingered. The Lakota knew how to accurately determine the time based on the degree to which such a scent had dissipated. A sharp and strong scent meant that the animal had passed through here very recently. A faint and highly dispersed trail indicated that several long hours had passed. This helped them accurately calculate the missing horse's speed and adjust their actions accordingly. It was as if the hunter were reading an invisible book of time right there in the cold air. Air humidity also played a crucial role in this complex process. Before the morning dew set in, the scents became very heavy and quickly settled to the ground. Hunters had to literally press themselves against the ground so as not to lose the trail. The dry night wind carried the scent trail over vast distances across the plain. They had to constantly analyze these weather factors to successfully complete the search. Training in this rare skill began from the earliest years of life in the tribe. The elders taught young hunters to distinguish scents with their eyes tightly closed. Constant practice honed this skill to the point of absolute automatism and perfection. A hunter could confidently follow a scent for hours on end without losing concentration at all. His entire nervous system was strictly attuned to a single frequency. Sometimes the scent would abruptly cut off, signaling a sudden change in the terrain. Air currents over deep ravines or high hills behaved extremely unpredictably. The hunter would immediately stop and begin to slowly scan the area in a widening spiral. This helped him pick up the lost, invisible trail of the desired scent again. The search would resume with renewed vigor and maximum concentration. In some cases, the scent could lead to completely unexpected discoveries in nature. A faint trail might mingle with the strong scent of a nearby body of water or a damp lowland. The hunter always took these natural admixtures into account, separating them from the main trail he was seeking. Complex analytical work took place in his mind continuously throughout the long journey. Success depended entirely on the tracker's personal experience and boundless patience. The nighttime prairie revealed its secrets only to the most attentive and persistent people. The sense of smell served as the most reliable compass in a world of absolute and impenetrable darkness. The use of this sense demonstrates humanity's incredible adaptation to the harsh natural world. I wonder how this topic is perceived in different parts of the world. Where are you watching from? Be sure to subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts in the comments. Are you ready to learn the truth about how ordinary grass became a detailed map? The second method involved a detailed tactile analysis of the Earth's surface. The Great Plains were densely covered with a carpet of very specific vegetation. Every step a horse took left a barely noticeable physical imprint on this surface. In the dark, these traces were completely impossible to see with the naked eye. The Lakota hunters used their own hands and feet for this complex process. They moved in very small steps, their feet gliding smoothly over the surface of the grass. Their moccasins, with incredibly thin soles, allowed them to clearly sense the slightest changes in the terrain. Grass trampled by a hoof felt completely different from grass growing evenly and untouched. An experienced tracker could easily determine even the depth of an indentation left by a heavy hoof. His hands were also very actively involved in this nighttime search. The hunter would regularly bend down low, carefully feeling the dry stalks with his fingers. Broken blades of grass released a specific plant moisture that was easily detectable by touch. The direction of the break in the stalk unerringly indicated the target's exact direction of movement. It was an extremely painstaking and very slow process of tactile analysis. Particular attention was always paid to the temperature of the vegetation trampled by the horse. Damaged grass released its heat much more quickly into the cold night air. The hunter could clearly feel this temperature difference simply with his open palm. A cold indentation meant that the track had been left there quite some time ago. A relatively warm track was a clear indication that the desired target was very close by. Different types of grasses reacted quite differently to the physical impact of hooves. Stiff stems snapped with a characteristic crunch that could be clearly felt through his boots. Soft vegetation was simply pressed down firmly, forming long, smooth trails in the darkness. The Lakota knew the properties of every plant in their vast native prairie, inside and out. This valuable knowledge had been passed down from generation to generation over many centuries. Sometimes an invisible trail led to areas of bare or rocky soil. In such difficult terrain, the grass could no longer serve as a reliable guide. The hunters had to search carefully for displaced pebbles or crumbling dry earth. Their fingers carefully felt the edges of indentations in the ground, unerringly determining how fresh they were. Every speck of displaced earth could tell its own story in detail. The natural direction of grass growth was also of immense importance to the tracker. The night wind usually bent all the stalks in one specific direction. If the grass was flattened against its natural slope, it was a sure sign of a trail. The hunter analyzed these slightest discrepancies, literally millimeter by millimeter. The nighttime prairie gradually transformed into a complex yet intelligible relief map. The dew, which fell heavily as morning approached, drastically altered all tactile sensations. The flattened grass collected droplets of moisture differently than the upright, healthy stalks. The hunter could clearly feel this difference in moisture on his own hands. Dry patches within the very damp meadow clearly outlined the contour of the trail he had left behind. Water served as an excellent developer for the invisible nighttime imprints. This method always required tremendous patience and immense physical endurance. Moving in a half crouch for long hours wore down even the strongest and most well-trained warriors. But the overwhelming desire to recover their valuable property compelled them to press forward relentlessly. Concentrating on the tips of their fingers completely shut out all extraneous, mundane thoughts. In such rare moments, a person became completely at one with the nature surrounding them. Reading tracks by touch was truly an art of survival. It allowed them to stay on course, even under the most difficult and unpredictable conditions. The knowledge of ancient ancestors regularly saved lives in the boundless expanses of America. Do you think modern people could master such a skill? In the next chapter, you'll learn how the ringing silence of the steppe became the loudest compass. Would you like to learn a secret that would change your life and your understanding of human hearing? The third method relied entirely on the phenomenal ability to listen to the nighttime prairie. During the day, the boundless steppe was filled with a multitude of distracting, loud sounds. At night, however, an absolute ringing silence set in, broken only by rare gusts of wind. In this perfect silence, any sound carried over enormous distances. The hunters were highly skilled at distinguishing the sounds of the wind from all other prairie noises. They knew exactly what the wind sounded like in tall grass or the branches of sparse shrubs. The slightest deviation from this natural symphony was instantly picked up by their trained minds. The dull thud of hooves striking stone carried clearly for many miles around. This barely perceptible sound became the trackers' most important nighttime compass. To significantly improve their hearing, the Lakota used the ground itself. The hunter would press his ear very tightly against firm, dry soil. The ground conducted low-frequency sounds several times better than ordinary air. The strong vibrations from heavy footsteps traveled through the ground over vast distances. This ancient method allowed them to hear their target long before it came within physical range. Particular importance was always attached to the sound of crunching vegetation. A heavy object would inevitably break dry branches and stiff stems with a loud crack. In the stillness of the night, this sound seemed simply deafening to a trained ear. The hunter analyzed the intervals between the cracks, unerringly determining the speed of the prey's movement. A steady rhythm indicated a calm stride, while a choppy one clearly signaled panic or a run. The sounds of heavy breathing or a horse's snorting were also excellent auditory cues. The cool, dense air facilitated the very clear transmission of such sound waves. Hunters would often freeze in place for several minutes to listen intently. They would close their eyes to focus completely and entirely on their auditory sensations. Each such pause yielded a new batch of incredibly valuable acoustic information. The terrain had a very strong influence on how sound traveled through the landscape. Low-lying areas and deep ravines could severely distort the direction of any noise source. High hills, on the other hand, often created an acoustic shadow, reliably concealing sounds. Trackers always took these features into account, constantly shifting their listening positions. They constructed a highly complex acoustic map of the terrain in their minds. The direction of the night wind also significantly altered the search process. A strong headwind carried sounds much faster and much more clearly. A tailwind, on the other hand, quickly carried all sounds in the exact opposite direction. Hunters had to mentally calculate the angle of sound deflection based on wind strength. This required strong analytical skills and a great deal of practical experience. Auditory navigation was particularly effective when combined with tactile verification. Upon hearing a distant sound, the hunter would immediately verify the direction by feeling the ground. This dual, reliable confirmation ruled out any possibility of error in pitch-black darkness. Hearing indicated the general direction, while the hands found the precise and correct path. These senses worked in perfect harmony with one another. The ability to listen to the prairie correctly required complete inner emotional calm. Any agitation or inner fear would take their breath away and severely impair their perception. The hunters entered a state of deepest meditation during their nighttime search. Their minds became absolutely clear and open to any signals from the outside. Only in this way could they clearly hear the true voice of the nighttime prairie. The Lakota Indians' acoustic skills were honed to absolute natural perfection. They could clearly hear what remained completely inaudible to the average person. This secret knowledge was the key to survival in the harsh world of the prairies. Be sure to like this video if you were impressed by the skill of the ancient trackers. Your support helps us immensely in the daily development of our educational channel. Can you guess what happened next when other familiar methods failed? Hunters began to carefully read the direction of the night wind on the plains. The wind on the Great Plains rarely blew chaotically or unpredictably. It followed very strict daily cycles and regular temperature changes. Understanding these patterns was the fourth most important method for successful nighttime navigation. A hunter always remembered the direction of the wind at the exact moment he lost sight of his target. Animals, driven by ancient instincts, very often moved directly against the wind. This allowed them to sense potential danger far ahead of them in advance. Knowing this trait, a tracker could easily determine the approximate area of his search. The wind became a vast, invisible compass in the boundless darkness of the steppe. Very subtle methods were used to determine the exact direction of a faint breeze. A hunter might lightly moisten his finger with saliva and slowly raise it upward. The side that cooled faster would accurately indicate the direction from which the wind was currently blowing. Light dust, gently scattered from a height of a person's stature, was also used. The direction of its fall provided the most accurate data on current air currents. At night, the wind often changed direction due to the rapid cooling of the ground. Cold, heavy air rolled down from the highlands into the lowlands and ravines. The Lakota knew the terrain of their territory perfectly and always took these changes into account. They could predict without fail which way the air current would turn in an hour. This knowledge was extremely helpful in planning the correct route for a nighttime pursuit. The strength of the wind also always carried a great deal of useful information. Sudden, strong gusts could completely mask sounds and scents, complicating the search. At such times, hunters preferred to lie low in cover and wait out the bad weather. A steady, light night breeze, on the other hand, was the tracker's ideal ally. It consistently carried valuable information from the desired direction without distortion. The prairie vegetation reacted incredibly sensitively to the slightest nighttime breezes. The hunter listened intently to the rustling of the grass, accurately determining the intensity of the airflow. A consistent rustling sound indicated that the surrounding weather conditions were completely stable. A sudden lull very often signaled an imminent change in wind direction. The tracker would instantly adjust his next moves based on this new information. If the trail was lost, the hunter immediately began moving strictly perpendicular to the wind. This greatly increased the chances of crossing the trail of the desired scents or sounds again. This shuttle tactic was extremely effective in vast open spaces. It allowed him to thoroughly comb through a huge area with minimal effort. The wind served as a very reliable reference point for these complex maneuvers. Experience observing clouds during the day greatly helped in predicting the night wind. The Lakota were highly skilled at reading the sky, anticipating future weather changes well in advance. These forecasts were vital for any extended nighttime expeditions. Knowledge of the weather allowed them to completely avoid fatal mistakes far from their home camp. The wind was an absolutely integral part of their unified understanding of the harsh world. From early childhood, every hunter learned to sense the wind with his face. Their skin became incredibly sensitive to even the slightest fluctuations in ambient temperature. It was a kind of built-in barometer that worked without a single failure. In complete darkness, their trust in their physical sensations was absolute. Doubt could prove far too costly in such harsh survival conditions. Using the wind perfectly demonstrates a deep understanding of nature's invisible laws. The Lakota never fought against the elements. Instead, they skillfully harnessed them for their own purposes. Do you think you could find your way at night using only the wind? In the next chapter, you'll learn how knowledge of the psychology of purpose. The fifth method was based entirely on a deep understanding of the behavior of living creatures. The Lakota knew the habits of a lost prey far better than anyone else. Every movement of a frightened or lost target strictly followed certain natural instincts. The hunter mentally put himself in the shoes of the pursued target in the darkness. This allowed him to predict its next logical steps with absolute precision. At night, a lost target always sought the safest hiding place. Usually, these were dense thickets of shrubs, deep ravines, or small groves of trees. The hunter knew the exact locations of such places throughout his vast territory. Instead of blindly following the trail, he could head straight there. This strategy significantly reduced the total time spent on grueling nighttime searches. The instinct to conserve energy compelled the target to take the path of least resistance. It always avoided steep ascents, deep swamps, and dense, thorny thickets. The hunter carefully analyzed the terrain and ruled out routes on the map that were obviously impassable. In the dark, he chose the gentlest and most convenient trails for his movement. The probability of encountering the target in such areas was simply the highest. A strong need for water was also a powerful motivating factor for the animal. If it had been lost for a long time, the animal would inevitably head toward the nearest freshwater source. The Lakota knew absolutely every spring, stream, and river in their vicinity. A hunter could set up an ambush near the water or begin his search right from there. This was an extremely logical and very calculated approach to a complex task. Intense fear caused the prey to move in jerks and frequently change direction. The hunter always took this into account when the trail suddenly became chaotic and confusing. He never panicked, but methodically untangled this complex web of tracks. A deep understanding of the reasons behind such behavior helped him always maintain the necessary composure. Human logic prevailed over the chaos of animal instincts in this nocturnal duel. The herd instinct also played a huge role in the behavior of the lost prey. The lost prey always sought out its own kind to ensure its safety. If other herds were nearby, the hunter would immediately head straight for them. The likelihood that the lost prey had quickly joined its kin was very high. Knowing the exact location of such groups saved a great deal of precious time. Temperature conditions greatly influenced the choice of a safe place to spend the night. On a cold night, the target actively sought reliable shelter from the wind in low-lying areas. In warm weather, it could safely remain on open steppe hills. The tracker always took these temperature preferences into account when planning his route. The weather sometimes pointed the way even better than any tracks. The hunter had to completely shut off his usual human emotions. Ordinary pity, irritation, or extreme fatigue interfered with cold, sober calculations. He became an absolutely flawless calculating machine on the prairie at night. Every decision was based solely on harsh facts and the millennia-old experience of his ancestors. Emotions remained at camp. Only a crystal-clear mind ventured out onto the prairie. The ability to think like the pursued prey was called complete fusion of minds. It was by no means a mystical act, but rather the result of deep empathy and long observation. The hunter knew full well that his target was experiencing intense fear and a sense of loneliness. He skillfully exploited these weaknesses to successfully complete his nighttime hunt. Human intellect always unconditionally prevailed over the fugitive's simple instincts. Knowledge of psychology was the true crowning achievement of the Lakota's complex art of tracking. Without it, all other methods would have been completely ineffective in practice. The 5 methods described worked flawlessly only when used as a single, coordinated system. The loss of a tool or weapon could easily be compensated for, but the loss of transportation meant disaster. That is precisely why the art of the nighttime search was honed to perfection over the centuries. I discovered this quite by accident while studying the ancient survival techniques of indigenous peoples. Hunters were able to navigate by the slightest temperature fluctuations on the prairie at night. The ground and dense vegetation cooled down extremely unevenly after the hot sun set. Open, rocky areas retained heat much longer than damp lowlands. This stable temperature gradient served as an invisible map of the complex terrain. Hunters moved about completely barefoot or in very thin leather moccasins. The skin on their feet was incredibly sensitive to any change in soil temperature. The transition from a warm, heated rock to cool grass was felt almost instantly. This allowed them to clearly understand the nature of the terrain, even though they could not see it at all in the dark. An experienced tracker could easily mentally map out the landscape based on his thermal sensations. Nighttime air currents also always carried vital temperature information. Descending into a deep ravine, the hunter felt a sudden chill at chest level. Climbing a hill, he distinctly sensed the warm, rising layers of night air. These temperature changes helped him confidently maintain the correct direction of travel. They served as completely natural markers of elevation in the utter darkness of the steppe. Dense thickets and trees created their own unique thermal anomalies. Under the tree canopy, the temperature was always slightly higher than in open areas. The The hunter could easily find a grove in the dark simply by moving toward the source of heat. This was extremely important for finding shelter or possible traces of prey. Heat was synonymous with life in the cold, nighttime steppe. Freshwater bodies also had their own unique and stable temperature profile. The water cooled much more slowly than the surrounding soil. As a hunter approached a river or lake, he could feel the gentle, warm breath of moisture. This allowed him to locate water sources with absolute certainty without relying on sight. Water was the most crucial point of reference in any complex search operation. Using temperature differences required an extremely high degree of inner concentration. A person had to constantly listen to their slightest physical sensations. Any external distraction could easily throw off their internal perceptual calibration. Hunters actively trained this ability over many years, hardening their bodies. Their skin gradually transformed into a highly precise biological measuring instrument. Precise temperature navigation was extremely helpful in avoiding very dangerous hidden areas. A sudden, sharp drop in temperature could warn of a deep pit or a steep cliff. Unexpected localized warmth could indicate a snake's nest or dangerous predators. Complete trust in their senses saved the hunters from fatal nighttime injuries. The nighttime prairie was brimming with hidden dangers for careless travelers. This method was particularly and incredibly effective on very clear nights. The complete absence of clouds contributed to the maximum temperature difference between landforms. On such nights, the contrast between heat and cold was particularly vivid and noticeable. Cloudy weather significantly smoothed out the gradient, making temperature navigation slightly more difficult. Hunters always took weather conditions very carefully into account before setting out. The ability to accurately read temperature made the hunter a full-fledged part of the ecosystem. He didn't just walk monotonously across the land, he felt its living pulse. Every slightest change in the terrain was distinctly felt in his own body. It was the deepest natural union between man and the harsh wilderness of the prairies. No modern technology can replace this level of integration with the world. Thermal perception was truly the sixth sense of the real Native American trackers. It harmoniously complemented their other methods, creating a three-dimensional picture of reality in the darkness. Have you ever found yourself in situations where you had to rely solely on your body's sensations? In the next chapter, you'll learn how feeling the ground with your hands served as a substitute for a visual map. The seventh method involved an incredibly detailed tactile analysis of the soil itself. Lakota hunters knew every type of soil in their vast territory, inside and out. Sand, ordinary clay, rocks, and black soil each had their own completely unique structure. In the dark, this structure became the primary source of information about their current location. The tracker's hands and feet constantly and continuously scanned the ground's surface. Different types of soil preserved the imprints of any tracks in completely different ways. Soft, moist clay left clear, deep indentations that were easy to read with the fingers. Dry sand was only slightly indented, requiring the tracker's hands to be as sensitive as possible. The hunters knew exactly where to look for the most easily readable tracks. They plotted their route, methodically moving from one soft patch to another. The density of the soil varied greatly in direct proportion to its proximity to water. The damp earth near bodies of water was very springy and yielding to the touch. Dry soil on open hills was always incredibly hard and crumbly. These tactile differences helped them navigate the complex terrain with extreme confidence. A tracker could find a stream simply by analyzing the density of the ground beneath his feet. Rocky areas posed the greatest challenge for nighttime searches. Ordinary tracks left virtually no marks on the rocks, which required a drastic change in tactics. Hunters carefully searched for small pebbles that had been dislodged or disturbed moss. Any change in the natural order of things was instantly detected by touch. Their fingers glided smoothly over the stones, reading microscopic changes in the surface texture. The ground temperature also always provided critically important navigational information. Areas that had been well warmed by the sun during the day actively gave off heat at night. A hunter could accurately determine whether he was on the southern or northern slope of a hill. Southern slopes were significantly warmer and drier, while northern slopes remained cooler and moister. It was an extremely reliable natural compass that worked without the slightest glitch. The root systems of various plants also served as excellent tactile markers. Completely different grasses always preferred different types of nutrient-rich soil. By feeling the roots, a hunter could determine the type of vegetation growing with absolute precision. This provided a complete understanding of the overall landscape in total darkness. The earth beneath his fingers told the entire story of that stretch of prairie in detail. The rate at which the soil dried out was extremely helpful in determining the exact time the prey had passed through. A very fresh track in soft soil was as moist and pliable as possible. After a few hours, the edges of the track would dry out noticeably and become very hard. A hunter could say with absolute certainty exactly when his prey had passed through that spot. This information was critically important for a skillful and successful pursuit. Tactile analysis of the soil always required immense patience and iron self-control. The hunter had to stop very often and get down on his knees. He felt the ground inch by inch, not missing a single small detail. It was incredibly painstaking work, comparable to reading complex braille. Mistakes here were absolutely unacceptable and would cost the tribe dearly. In heavy rain, the tactile landscape of the prairie changed drastically and rapidly. The ground became very slippery and sticky, and tracks were instantly washed away. Hunters had to quickly adapt their skills to entirely new conditions. They sought out dry patches, reliably sheltered from the rain by the canopies of dense trees. Flexibility of thought was the most important key to successful survival in the darkness. The sense of touch, feeling the soil, was an absolutely fundamental skill for the Native American trackers of the plains. It bound a person firmly to the earth with invisible yet very strong threads. This contact gave them incredible confidence with every step, even on the darkest night. The land of the Great Plains always helped those who knew how to understand it properly. The wisdom of the ancestors was securely encoded in every tiny grain of sand. The eighth method was based entirely on a profound knowledge of prairie botany. The vegetation of the Great Plains was distributed not at all randomly, but according to strict laws. Certain types of grasses grew only under very specific and strict conditions. Knowledge of these patterns allowed one to navigate perfectly well without sight. Hunters confidently identified plants by touch and by their specific scent. Very tall and stiff grass usually grew in lowlands and along riverbeds. Once in such thickets, a tracker knew his location with absolute certainty. Short, very dry grasses always predominated on open steppe hills. The transition from one type of vegetation to another served as a very clear marker. The plants were, in a sense, reliable road signs in this nocturnal steppe. The shape of the shrubs was extremely helpful in determining the prevailing direction of local winds. The branches were always slightly bent toward the direction from which the main wind blew. By feeling the crown of a shrub, a hunter had a reliable natural compass at his disposal. This was extremely helpful for maintaining the correct course in the complete absence of other landmarks. Nature itself willingly pointed the way to the extremely attentive traveler. Some species of prairie plants kept their buds tightly closed all night long. Their familiar shape and texture changed significantly once complete darkness set in. The Lakota were well aware of these changes and actively used them for orientation. The distinctive nighttime scent of certain flowers could serve as an excellent beacon from a distance. Plants played a very active role in the hidden nocturnal life of the vast prairie. Thorny shrubs quite often formed completely natural, dense barriers. Animals always instinctively tried to avoid such dangerous obstacles. The hunter knew the location of these thorny thickets perfectly well and did not waste time combing through them. He looked only for gentle, winding paths that his prey might take. This saved precious time and energy during difficult hunts. Edible and medicinal herbs also served as very good nighttime landmarks. Hunters always carefully memorized the places where they grew abundantly during the day. At night, these spots became important checkpoints along the long route. Finding a familiar clearing with medicinal herbs meant confirming with absolute certainty that they were on the right course. A memory for useful plants was an incredibly vital skill. Dry trees and dead, fallen trunks held a very special significance for them. Their bark peeled away in a very specific way, strictly depending on which side faced the sun. The north side of the trunk was always more damp and thickly covered with moss. The south side always remained as dry as possible and very smooth to the touch. Feeling the trunks provided absolutely precise coordinates in this empty space. The sound of dry leaves rustling depended heavily on the specific type of tree. Oak leaves rustled very heavily and rather dully in the wind. Willow leaves produced an incredibly light and very ringing sound with every gust. By listening to this nocturnal forest chorus, a tracker could determine the composition of the grove with absolute precision in the dark. Every step tree had its own completely unique acoustic voice. The interaction between the target and the vegetation left very obvious physical traces. Broken branches, gnawed bark, or trampled flowers were easily detected by touch. These fresh signs of damage were much more noticeable than hoofprints on hard ground. The hunter examined the vegetation very carefully along the animal's presumed path. The vegetation treacherously and unmistakably betrayed the fugitive's nocturnal presence. The plant life of the prairies was an open book to the Lakota. Every blade of grass on the prairie contained a tiny grain of incredibly useful information. The application of this ancient knowledge made nighttime navigation incredibly precise and infallible. Man and the surrounding nature spoke the same very ancient and understandable language. It was an endless dialogue in which the most attentive always survived. The ninth method relied entirely on the human mind's phenomenal spatial memory. Lakota hunters possessed an amazing ability to mentally record their every step. They created a highly detailed, three-dimensional mental map of the entire route they had traveled. This map was instantly updated in real time with every new turn. In the dark, this reliable internal projection became their primary and only navigational guide. A hunter always clearly remembered the number of steps between all key landmarks. He knew with absolute precision the distance from a large tree to a ravine or from a rock to a stream. This unique, built-in internal pedometer worked without the slightest glitch. It allowed him to instantly calculate his location with absolute mathematical precision. With such a skill, it was practically impossible to get lost on the prairie. His sense of direction, or spatial proprioception, had been actively trained since childhood. The tracker always knew exactly which way he had turned and at what angle. Even after countless zigzags, he could unerringly point the way back to camp. This incredible ability was completely independent of visual landmarks or a compass. It was deeply ingrained in his muscle memory and vestibular system. His mental map necessarily included not only distances, but also the complex terrain. The hunter remembered perfectly every ascent, steep descent, and pit along his long journey. Moving in complete darkness, he prepared his body in advance for changes in elevation. This greatly helped him avoid injury and conserve energy during an extremely long trek. A person's inner vision completely and unconditionally replaced external vision. If the tracker clearly realized he had lost his way, he would immediately begin retracing his steps. He would walk strictly along the tracks he himself had left behind, moving backward and analyzing every step. This tactic always allowed him to return with absolute precision to the original reference point. There, he could calmly reassess the situation and choose the correct route. Ironclad composure was the most important rule in such difficult situations. Spatial memory was extremely helpful in synchronizing absolutely all of his other senses. Smells, sounds, and the slightest tactile sensations were instantly overlaid onto his mental map. The result was an incredibly complex, multi-dimensional picture of everything happening around him. The hunter's brain continuously processed this colossal array of data at an incredible speed. It was the absolute pinnacle of human natural adaptation to a complex environment. Keeping precise track of time while on the move always played a very important role. Hunters were highly skilled at determining elapsed hours based on their internal biological clocks. Knowing the exact time and speed of movement provided an absolutely precise distance to the target. This arithmetic of nighttime survival was applied completely instinctively and constantly. Any error in these calculations could easily lead to the most fatal consequences. Training in this art necessarily included exercises with the eyes tightly blindfolded. The elders would lead the young warriors far from their home camp and leave them completely alone. The young man had to find his way home on his own, relying solely on his memory and senses. Such rigorous training excellently strengthened character and developed spatial awareness. Only the most incredibly capable and tenacious students survived on the prairie. A mental map of the vast terrain was always passed down exclusively by word of mouth. Hunters would describe in detail to one another even the slightest changes in the local terrain. The entire territory of the tribe had been thoroughly studied and documented in the memories of many generations. This collective mind of the prairies was the most reliable repository of invaluable knowledge. The Native Americans valued information far more highly than any material or earthly possessions. The memory of a complex route was every tracker's most important internal safeguard. It gave them absolute confidence in their abilities in any critical situation. A person became the true master of the landscape, even when they could not see it at all. This ancient skill is a perfect testament to the boundless capabilities of the inquisitive human mind. Darkness could not break one who always carried a bright light within. The 10th and most important method consisted of a special and profound mental state. Hunters called it a rare state of transparency or complete fusion with the shadows. In this astonishing state, a person completely ceased to separate themselves from their surroundings. They became an integral part of the nighttime prairie, its breath and pulse. Only in this state did absolutely all of the skills described work 100%. To achieve transparency, one had to completely and permanently silence any internal dialogue. Any thoughts about the past or future instantly blocked perception of the present moment. The brain had to focus exclusively on receiving incoming external information. Fear, fatigue, and doubts were ruthlessly suppressed by an incredible effort of will. A person's consciousness became smooth and calm, like the surface of a clear mountain lake. The hunter's breathing was completely synchronized with the rhythm of the nighttime steppe wind. He inhaled incredibly deeply and silently, richly saturating his blood with the necessary oxygen. Proper, rhythmic breathing sharpened his hearing and sense of smell to the very limit of what was possible. His body moved in a state of complete relaxation, carefully conserving every precious drop of energy. It was very much like an ancient trance dance in absolute darkness. In this astonishing state, intuition always came to the very forefront without question. Sometimes the tracker simply knew where to go, without the slightest logical justification. The brain processed microsignals much faster than the conscious mind could fully comprehend them. Such sudden flashes of insight very often led directly to the target lost in the night. Intuition was a direct result of a vast accumulation of experience and ultra-deep concentration. The hunter completely ceased to feel the surrounding cold or physical pain. His nervous system rigorously filtered out the body's signals, focusing exclusively on the external environment. In this state, his endurance instantly increased many times over to superhuman limits. He could walk steadily without rest or food for several long days in a row. The desired target became the absolute sole purpose of his existence at that moment. They would emerge from this state of transparency only after precisely locating their target. The abrupt return to normal emotions very often led to severe physical exhaustion. Hunters always needed a long time to recover and regain their strength. They sincerely thanked the ancient spirits of the prairie for their help in this difficult quest. This ritual fully concluded the incredibly complex cycle of nighttime steppe navigation. Far from every warrior could attain this highest level of inner concentration. It required a very special mindset and many years of complex meditative practices. The very best trackers were always held in the highest regard within their tribe. They were genuinely believed to possess incredible supernatural abilities. In reality, this was merely the result of incredible hard work and the strictest discipline. The state of oneness made it possible to detect the slightest anomalies in empty space. The hunter could clearly sense another's presence with his skin, like a strange tension in the air. It was the most ancient animal instinct, awakened within the body of an ordinary person. It was extremely helpful not only for finding the missing person, but also for avoiding encounters with predators. The prairie had always favored only those who fully accepted its harsh rules of the game. In our modern, safe lives, we have almost lost this amazing ability to fully immerse ourselves. The abundance of information and technology greatly dulls our most ancient natural instincts, but the experience of ancient peoples clearly demonstrates what our physical bodies are truly capable of. We carry within us the most ancient survival mechanisms, hidden very deep inside. They can be awakened only under conditions of absolute, uncompromising necessity. The art of tracking, practiced by the Lakota Native Americans, is an absolute triumph of human will and intellect. It clearly proves that humans can adapt to any conditions, no matter how harsh. The darkness of the Great Plains was never a terrifying and merciless enemy to them. It was a very harsh teacher who generously rewarded incredible diligence and boundless patience. Their ancient heritage deserves the deepest respect and the most careful study. This brings our detailed account of these incredible nighttime survival skills to a close. I hope you found it fascinating to learn about the forgotten secrets of the indigenous peoples of North America. What other topics from the rich history of the Great Plains would you like to see covered in future videos? Be sure to share all your suggestions in the comments below this video. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on brand new, exciting stories from the past.